Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsome with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart. Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown. May has thrown this one. He threw it left-handed. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading in with Barshot. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio into the Cajun for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you as always, back for the second time tonight here on a Monday night, getting you prepared and recapping everything that went on in the game against Charlotte over the weekend. Of course, earlier this evening, went back, talked a little bit about JB Shabazz and his flip from Tennessee to Carolina. If you guys want to go check that out, feel free to go ahead and check out that edition of the podcast. We'll tell you a little bit more about it at the end of the show as well. But tonight here at 8 o'clock, it is all about the game against the Charlotte 49ers. The Tar Heels with a 20-3 win over Charlotte on the road in Jerry Richardson Stadium. It was the sold-out crowd for the Charlotte 49ers on Saturday night. It was a raucous environment, as raucous as it can be when you've got a little over 19,000 fans in the building, but certainly an environment that Carolina should have been able to withstand, and they did, finding a way to pull out a 17-point victory. So we're going to talk about this game, really how we have two different opinions on how exactly the game went and really what exactly it means for this season moving forward. There were some positives, there were some negatives from this game, and still, plenty to talk about. But I think, really the way to start it is I think it really starts with this offense for Carolina. The way they performed in this game was certainly not where a lot of people were hoping that they were going to perform after what we saw last week. Carolina scores 20 points in this game, which was, not the worst output that you could have possibly had from Carolina based off of, some of the passes that were made early in the game. Really the first two drives of the game, once again, looking really, really good for Carolina. But once you got off the script, it really seemed like from there, Freddie Kitchens struggled. Carolina's offense really wasn't able to move the field, and it left many people with questions to ask about where this Carolina offense is at. When you think about what we saw on Saturday night, really focusing on Freddie Kitchens, because I think this is the main takeaway in terms of what I saw on social media, in terms of what the fan base is talking about here as we sit on a Monday. Many people still pointing the finger at Freddie Kitchens and not happy with the way that this offense looked in this game. What do you think about that, Josh Marlowe?
Yeah, I do think if there's one thing to be critical about or concerned about from what you saw in the win, it is Freddie Kitchens' offense, and it's really more the lack of, I think, of scheme. This offense in two games has not targeted the middle of the field, which is really bizarre to think about when you think about how defenses are attacked. Look at the way people attack Carolina. They want to attack the middle of the field because they don't have the linebackers to maybe hold up in coverage, and maybe they struggle, with their nickels or whatever. It feels like for Carolina, it's boom or bust. And I mean, they're either going to throw the ball deep or they're going to throw the ball at or behind the line of scrimmage. But I kind of look at Saturday, and I think the biggest thing was to get a win. Carolina got that. And the second thing, I think it was to just reinstill some confidence in your quarterback after a disastrous opening performance 5 days prior with 6.1 million people watching you and every big luminary associated with the university, associated with Bill Belichick on hand. And so was mildly surprised that we did not see any of Max Johnson, but I think it was a clear indication of where this staff is at, where whether it's because of the financial component or what they've just seen in practice, they are committed to Gio Lopez being the quarterback. And so I think what they did on Saturday night was just to try to reinstill some confidence in him, get him closer to playing to the level that what they saw when they went and got him out of the transfer portal. And I think you saw glimpses of that on Saturday with the big touchdown pass early. He did get his legs involved in the run game. A lot of it was him tucking and running, not necessarily the design runs I think we want to see a part of the game plan, but you saw glimpses of the Gio Lopez that made us believe that he could be a quarterback that could make the adjustment from group of 5, group of 6 to the P4 conference level. It just has to be more consistent. But that's where this team is at. That's where this program is at. They are chasing consistency. And I think they took a step. Don't know how big that step was, but they took a step in that direction on Saturday night, getting a 20-3 win, overcoming a weather delay, which we saw a bunch of teams around the country struggle with that. The weather in the second half really made it to where they could run the ball, manage time, score, and field position. And so all in all, not the sexiest, but the first of what I think will be many wins for Bill Belichick in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I thought it was a rather disappointing win. Just from the perspective of what we saw from the offense, I thought for the most part they were rather unaggressive the entire night. I mean, looked like a team that was really just playing not to lose for most of the evening, and still looked like an offense that was scared of its quarterback. I thought, we saw early in the game, they really settled Gio Lopez in with a couple of short passes. I like that, but I thought as the game went along, you would see them start to open things up a little bit more, and it never really happened. You had the one deep pass to Chris Culliver. You had a couple of other throws along the sideline that they had that were a little further down the field, but for the most part, a lot of this stuff was behind the line of scrimmage, really just trying to, in my opinion, not show the weaknesses that their quarterback has, which is that he cannot throw with any sort of anticipation. He's a guy that I think at this point, we have to have a legitimate conversation about whether or not he's actually a guy that's going to be able to win this team conference games once we actually get into the games that matter. I just, to me, you still saw a very bland offensive scheme. You saw a team that wanted to run the ball at certain times, but then at other times really just chose not to run the football. And that was head scratching to me when, a week ago, we sat there and saw you guys try to run it up against a brick wall for nearly the entire first half. In this game, we're begging you to run the ball with certain guys, and you choose not to run the football with certain guys. You also didn't choose to run your quarterback yet again, which we said, if you're going to stick with this guy as your quarterback, let's have an offense that actually fits what he wants to do. That's not what you saw from Carolina on Saturday night. You saw a team that, once again, really looked like they were trying to force Gio Lopez to do something that he is not I wouldn't say not capable of doing, but still is not comfortable doing. And some people were saying it, well, maybe Gio Lopez just hasn't settled into the system yet. Well, then he shouldn't have been the starting quarterback for this team. They should have went with Max Johnson. Max Johnson is healthy. So if he is not a guy that's up to speed on the playbook and needs more time, well, then you've got to go with a guy in Max Johnson who's going to make this offense look better. This offense should have been able to score probably somewhere in the 30s, if not higher, in this game against a defense for Charlotte that is not good. I mean, the fact that App State tore them apart the way that they did, and you had no semblance of doing that really for most of the night, is really concerning to me, and I think shows that there is still a long way to go for this offense this season. And I don't think we thought this offense would be this much of a work in progress. Now, part of it is that you don't have any sort of continuity on the offensive line. I think that's certainly something that we got to talk about as well. But I don't think it's too crazy to say that you're disappointed with where this offense is after the first 2 games of the season.
Yeah, I do think that I think we expected more because I think we believe in the talent more than maybe some of our coworkers, other people around the ACC, around Carolina. Maybe they believe in the talent. I do think this is the downside of how Belichick, has been used to coaching. When you have all that time in the NFL, you have a month to figure stuff out. You don't have that in college. And with so many new players, as we've talked about, that came in the spring, it's why he said it, and I put it in the press conference pod I did a week ago. This is what we're going to see for 5 to 6 games. Now, you hope with each passing game, the rotation, the substitution patterns get less and less. But he said it's going to take us 5 to 6 games to know who we are, figure out who our best players are, our best plays are, and really form an identity. And he said that because in the NFL, that's when it takes you till about the end of September, early October. Difference is in the NFL, you had 16, now you have 17 games. In college, you have 12. And so when you get to that 5-6 game threshold, half your season is over. And so where's Carolina going to be at in week 5, week 6? Are they going to be a team that's 3-2, or are they going to be a team that's 2-3? Because I think what that record looks like will maybe impact, one, if they go to a bowl game, but two, really, can they really get to that 7 to 8 win threshold? And so there's no doubt you need to see more from this offense. I also think that, and maybe this is me making an excuse for them, I don't think it is. They had 2 days to prepare for this game. You played Monday night, nothing on Tuesday. When Belichick spoke on Wednesday, they hadn't even practiced yet. So you had 2 days to really prepare for this game. Now, granted, they said they did a lot of preparation, or not a lot, but they did some mild prep leading up to, in the preseason because of the quick turnaround. But as bad as it looked on Monday night, I think they did kind of go in there with a simplified game plan. They knew that they could wear them down up front. They knew they had more talent. Just kind of get in, get out with a win, and get on to next week. And so I think if we gather on Saturday and we watch the same type of offensive output, production, and let's say Carolina wins the game 28-10, but it's a rather unimpressive 28-10, then I do think that it's going to be time to really, hit the alarm button on Freddie Kitchens and what he's doing. But I think this is just the unfortunate part to what Bill Belichick and what Michael Lombardi have set out to do, where they're going to evaluate this roster, and with that, you're going to get herky-jerky performances on both sides of the football.
Yeah, I think the evaluation period here is going to be very painful because we're seeing it already on the offensive line where, you've gone through now 3 left tackles. Carolina's put out Aiden Buchanan to start the year against TCU. They put out William Boone, who was simply not good and still is getting a lot of playing time. I don't really understand why. And they put out Travion Green. And I think that's probably your best option there. I know he took a penalty when he was in there, but I think that's probably your best option. And, the other thing is they're still trying to evaluate all these receivers. There are guys that haven't necessarily stepped up and been able to create the amount of separation that they would probably like. That's probably something that should be concerning, considering that there was so much separation, especially in the middle of the field in the first game of the season against Charlotte's defense by App State. You were hoping that Carolina would be able to do something similar. They throw for 155 yards. App State threw for 404 yards in the first game of the season. Carolina should have been somewhere in that neighborhood, or at least somewhere with, in the 200s. I mean, if you were the offense that you thought you could be. But again, a lot of this stuff was behind the line of scrimmage. It seemed like Freddie Kitchens was still concerned about his quarterback going downfield. I don't know if it's an issue of whether or not he can see over the line of scrimmage. I think that's certainly something that Carolina had to take into account when they went out and got him out of the transfer portal, was that he was a smaller quarterback and he would be playing against a big offensive line that Carolina has in place. But it still just looks to me like he is concerned about using his quarterback the way that a quarterback needs to be used. And like I said, when you look at Gio Lopez, I mean, this game wasn't bad. 17 of 25, 155 yards, a touchdown, and I had 9 carries for 44 yards. Thought he ran the ball really well. I thought that was something that you were hoping that as the game went along, you would see Freddie Kitchens sort of implement a little bit more. But the thing is that you still saw some moments from Gio Lopez where, he wasn't exactly great. A couple of missed throws. And most importantly, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you saw, the air yards on a lot of his passes were very, very short. So I still think there is reason to believe that this is a guy that right now doesn't have your offense working at the rate that it probably could if a guy like Max Johnson was in there. Or, I mean, and to me, I don't know if he would actually be good enough. He's a guy that hasn't had a lot of time under center himself, but people are bringing up Bryce Baker. I really don't know about that. I would be more inclined to start Max Johnson, but I believe that this team right now, with the quarterback that's in there, it feels like this is a limited group, and that's just a bad feeling to have, especially when you had quarterbacks like Drake May and Sam Howell where things felt unlimited. I'm not saying you've got to be that, but I don't know right now if he's better than what Jacoby Criswell was for Carolina at times last year.
Yeah, I disagree with that notion. I don't think he is as bad as what you saw at Jacoby Criswell, because as guys that defended Jacoby the first handful of games last year when he got into the lineup and then all hell broke loose, you go back to the way he just ended the season with performances at Floyd, Boston College and against NC State. I mean, it was Nathan Elliott levels of bad. I don't think Gio Lopez is there. I do think he needs help from his play caller. I do think that this is a guy that could really utilize, being in a much more mobile pocket, getting him on the run more. And you see this with a lot of different quarterbacks now. I used to say it when I was a fan of the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott. I always felt like he was a better thrower when his legs were involved. For some reason, when his legs were involved as a runner, it got him in a better rhythm as a passer. I think that could be the thing for Gio Lopez, where I think the rhythm that comes with the passing game comes with what he does as a runner. And I think they're reluctant to run him because they don't want to put Max Johnson in a situation where if he gets injured, they're turning to a true freshman to play quarterback. But you can't coach scared either. Like, you got to trust that Gio Lopez will be a smart enough runner to avoid the hits that can get him injured, know when to slide, know when to get out of bounds, and do those things that could really help your offense. Because I heard our buddy Wes Bryant today say he kind of went after our wide receiver room and thinks that that's what's holding the offense back. I disagree with that opinion 100%. I don't think this is a bad wide receiver room at all. I believe in what Jordan Shipp can, and I still think will be. You saw Chris Clover before he got injured make a big play. I think they've got to use Kobe Paysour in a way that utilizes his skill set more. And so, I think that's what this week really has to be about, is starting to put these guys in the best situation as possible to make plays and get the most out of what you have, out of your starting wide receivers. You want to play, Javarius Green and Alex Taylor, rotate through those 5. I think I'm okay with that. But you've also got to get some continuity, as you mentioned, at the offensive line. You mentioned you've played 2 games. You've played 3 different guys at left tackle. Like, none of this is ideal. None of this benefits your quarterback. And so the quicker that Carolina speeds this process up, I think the quicker we get to having a real firm evaluation of Freddie Kitchens as a play caller, Gio Lopez as a quarterback. And I think that's going to be my big thing this week going into this game against an FCS opponent. I said after the TCU game, where, we all had to come back and take a step back and look at this from a different angle from where we were going into it. I said the next 2 weeks was all about getting answers, get 2 wins, but more importantly, get some answers. I think they got some answers this past weekend. You're looking for more this weekend at home against Richmond.
Yeah, I mean, look, Harold says on Facebook, Gio should only be in the shotgun, giving him more time to see the field. Look, you're going to run under center stuff. That is just what this offense is. That's something that Gio Lopez signed up for. He knew when he came in here, this was going to be part of what he had to do. So he simply just has to be better at that. But I do think that that's still something that we need to see more of. We did see a little bit more of it in this game, with them putting him in the shotgun, then putting him in the pistol. But still, I think, first of all, when you say giving him more time to see the field, well, that really starts with your center being able to snap the damn ball, because your center cannot snap the ball. Chad Lindbergh is terrible at center. There's just no way around that. And until you get a legitimate center in there, it's going to be really hard to evaluate where this team is at. I don't know if that means that you're going to have that by Saturday. I doubt it. I would imagine that there will be one more week where Christo Kelly will not play a significant amount of snaps, and then what they'll probably end up doing is try to roll Christo out for the game against Central Florida in hopes that he can, from there be as close to 100% healthy moving forward. But I mean, yeah, it's hard to evaluate your quarterback when the snaps are just taking forever, at least from that perspective. The thing for me is that there were times where he still had a pretty clean pocket, and it just didn't feel like he was, not going to say force the issue, but when you're at this level, you've got to be able to throw with anticipation. You've got to be able to throw receivers open a little bit. And that's the one thing, you can criticize Jacoby Criswell all you wanted. When he took over at the start of last year, he was able to throw guys open. I don't know if that's Gio Lopez's strength. I don't know if that's there for Gio Lopez. And that's something that concerns me, because I think that's there for Max Johnson. I think you saw it in the game against TCU. And you can say it's against backups. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, those backups that he played against TCU were better than the defense that Charlotte rolled out there on Saturday night. And Carolina put up 20 points. I mean, that's the biggest thing to me. And Greg Ward brings it up. 20 points against a horrible Charlotte team is mind-blowing. It's not going to be good enough when they get into conference play. Charlotte, I cannot stress this enough. Charlotte is maybe the worst FBS team right now outside of Kent State. Kent State is about as bad of a football team as I think I've ever watched. I mean, they literally snapped the ball off their own man region earlier in the week and had and lost the fumble. But Charlotte's right up there, man. And we'll talk about, what Carolina did defensively. But, I mean, yeah, they're a bad offensive team, and they are a bad defensive team. They're a team that let up 586 yards of total offense to App State in the first game of the season. This should have been a better performance from Carolina all around. They didn't run the ball terribly, but they certainly didn't throw the ball the way that they should have been able to in this game. And I do think it's okay to leave a little bit concerned about where the passing offense is going into this game. You brought up that you don't think it's the receivers. mean, yeah, I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of talent in that room. But in terms of creating separation, I mean, yeah, there wasn't a ton of times that guys were running wide open. From what we could tell. Now, it's harder to tell on television than it is when you're actually out there. But it didn't seem like there were any egregious misses that you were seeing from Gio Lopez, throughout most of the night. But I mean, maybe there are, and maybe this is a wide receiving core that's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and Gio just isn't making the throws that he's supposed to. But that's the thing. Hopefully against Richmond, those sort of things start to change, and Carolina's passing offense can evolve, because even if Carolina runs the ball as successfully as they did against Charlotte, which wasn't bad, 148 yards on the ground isn't bad, that's not going to be enough to carry this offense throughout this season.
No, it's not. Not if you want to win the type of games that I think the schedule suggests Carolina could and should win. With the arrival of Belichick, I think you're gonna take a step. I think this week, in a big way. But we kind of talked about this at different points, in the preseason when kind of getting ready for the year. I don't know. And this might be by design. I don't know if Carolina wants to be an offense or a team that is scoring 35, 38, 41 points like they were, as we got so accustomed to with Larry Fedora and how explosive those offenses were. And then you got into, your two quarterbacks with Sam and Drake, where you knew every single Saturday, if Carolina had to go put up 40, they were capable, because you had two of the best quarterbacks in the conference, two of the best quarterbacks in the country on your campus for the last 5 years. Like, I do think that, when Belichick talks about being the 33rd team at the college level, I do think like they kind of model what you see at the NFL level, where you do see teams that put up 30-plus points on a week-in, week-out basis, but a lot of games are played in that 24 to 28 kind of range, and maybe he's trying to build his team to play games at that rate, at that style, win games with those point thresholds. I do think that they want to shorten games. I do think they want to limit possessions, because that's when this defense is going to be at its best. In college, you play about 12 to 14 possessions per game. You look at the NFL game, you play at maximum, depending on the opponent, you maybe get 10. Like, usually you get about 8 possessions at the NFL level. And so I do think that's part of it too. I think that's a big part of the adjustment that Belichick has to take as he's adjusting from the college game from the pro game to the college game. We can talk about overtime rules and the hash marks, but the game's played at a different pace as well. And so I do think that's something else where I think they've got to move a lot quicker on offense, because it's very slow pace. It's very methodical. That, to me, does not benefit your quarterback. And you're talking about a quarterback that took 6 snaps in his entire career at South Alabama. How many times was he in a huddle? And we're talking not just at the college level. You're talking at the high school level. And, dude, it's now at the middle school level where these offenses are so advanced. These guys aren't used to being in a huddle. They're used to looking over at the sidelines, seeing a postcard note with 4 different signals that give you the game plan. I think that's something where we want to be critical. Let's speed this up, because I think your quarterback needs to play more off of instincts. I think he's thinking more than he's just playing. I think he needs to be more proactive than being reactive to what's happening. And so, no, they cannot win moving forward, averaging 17 points per game. I do think, though, that they will creep that number into the mid to upper 20s. But I don't think this is going to be an offense designed to score 35-plus points on a week-in, week-out basis like we've seen the last 10, 15 years here.
You would just like to be able to score that way against Charlotte. Like, my thing is that you had to punt the ball 6 times in this game. Tom McGinnis actually leads all of college football in punts this season. So that tells you how efficient Carolina's offense has been. It hasn't been. You have some scoring drives where Carolina was able to move the ball and they were able to take some time off the clock. And that's certainly something that they want to do. And I get that. But you've got to be just an all-around more efficient offense. More drives need to result in touchdowns if you're going to run a slower pace. And to me, that's the important thing. Yes, you could speed the pace up, but I get part of it is you want to keep this defense fresh. That was one thing that Larry Fedora never really seemed to understand, that Mack Brown, I think, may have had a grip on, but never actually executed it. And I mean, unfortunately, you know, it led to Carolina's defenses just getting completely ran down. And, you know, towards the end of the season, they would get worn out. I mean, you look at some of the snap counts, the amount of snaps that these defenses were on the field. It was sickening. It honestly made you sick to your stomach that you were seeing that many plays on these defensive guys as the season went along. And yeah, part of that was that they needed to rotate, but part of it was that the offense was moving way too fast. Now with this offense, it feels like things are moving way too slow. And you're like, okay, let's pick things up just a little bit here. Maybe get some pace going just to get, yeah, you're right, your quarterback a little more settled, because that was what he was used to. But the other part of it is that, you know, this is also on Gio Lopez to be able to adjust. They went out and got you. This is the offensive system that you're a part of. You need to be able to adjust to it. But I mean, that's just the thing, is that you need to see more efficient offense, because a game like this against Charlotte, you should not have been in a game where you thought there was a chance that Charlotte was going to be getting themselves back into it, where late in the game, you were fearful of the fact that Charlotte could make this a 2-possession game. Hell, it could have been a 1-possession game. You know, if they end up converting on the field goal and then they end up scoring the touchdown that was dropped in the end zone, we're talking about a 1-possession game at Charlotte. That's certainly not a situation that you would have ever imagined yourself in if you were Carolina. I mean, that's something that, yeah, we were, you know, wanting them to win. But, I mean, the other part of it, we were wanting it to look a little bit prettier. We were hoping that the talent gap would be a little bit more significant. Let's turn there really quickly. And then, you know, we'll turn back to the positives of the offensive and defensive sides of the football. But I think the talent gap, it still wasn't as significant as it should have been, especially in the trenches. This was a game where you expected Carolina to come out and dominate in certain areas of the game. And you thought it would start up front. You thought that Carolina would have the horses up front. You thought on the offensive line, Carolina would be able to control the line of scrimmage, would be able to run the football at a really high rate, would be able to, you know, pass protect at a really high rate. Think, you know, for a second straight week, the pass protection was probably better than you thought that it was. But, you know, I see why you would think that it wasn't necessarily great. The more concerning area is the defensive line, because the defensive line does not even look remotely ready to compete in conference play. And again, maybe I'm just overreacting to what we saw in this game. Maybe I'm someone that needs to chill out. But I mean, this was a team that just, you know, during certain points of this game, they were being pushed around. You know, in the run game, even though they only allowed 21 rushing yards in this game, it still felt like there were times where Charlotte was able to break off significant runs. The more concerning thing was you were never really able to get pressure on the quarterback. They got 16 total quarterback pressures in this game. I would like to ask Pro Football Focus, where did those pressures come from? Because we sure as hell didn't see it. Connor Harrell stood back there and threw the ball pretty much anywhere that he wanted to for most of the night. Now, the good news is that Connor Harrell is not a good quarterback. And we continue to learn that in this game. He only threw for 140 yards. But then Grayson Loftus comes in, and in 2 drives, he throws for 110 yards and goes right down the field on Carolina, because once again, there was not any quarterback pressure. I just thought that was the thing that really stood out to me, was that once again, we were looking for there in this game to be a significant talent gap in Carolina to really show and flex their muscle in the trenches. And that was certainly not the case. That was certainly not what we saw out there on the field on Saturday night.
Yeah, they're going to need Price Yates to get here sooner rather than later if they really want to have a difference maker that they can hang their hat on going into every single game to, you know, apply pressure on the quarterback. let's harken back to, guys, the Bo Atkinson late loss of the transfer portal is looming larger and larger with where this defensive line room is at. I think you've got pieces up there that can and will be good. I think Dontre Robinson, if he stays in the program next year, can be a really good player. Maybe see, that's one guy that I really identify. They are going to have to scheme up pressure. That is something that I have that I am convinced of, is that you don't have war daddies up front that can win. And now that's a difference in where the program is at right now than when Mack Brown came back and you had two dudes in Aaron Crawford and Jason Strowbridge that played, 80 plus snaps every Saturday and really held their own. Bill Belichick, Stephen Belichick, they do not have that at their disposal right now. They do not have a guy that they can count on to play 60+% of the snaps, and he's going to win more often than not, which means you're going to have to scheme up pressure. And that's what, there are teams around the country that have the same issue Carolina has. But you've got to be able to get pressure in different ways. And I don't know if they didn't want to show anything on Saturday night. Maybe that's something where you'll see more of that against Clemson, where they're saving some of that stuff on film. But I feel like you're going to have to send a lot of, Andrew Simpson on some blitzes. I think at some point you're going to have to get your secondary involved as well. And the problem with that is once you start, committing more than what you can cover, if you don't get home, then you're going to open yourself up for big plays. And so I do think that is going to be an area within the program that when the season does come to an end, that'll be where they are most aggressive, I do think, in the transfer portal this upcoming year, is just getting more P4 caliber guys that are ready, impact players than they have right now. Because a lot of the guys they brought in, Robinson, Smith, Bilbert, some of the others, you're banking on upside. And the problem is that when you're banking on that doesn't show up in the first two games. That's something that it's going to maybe take until week 6, week 7, week 8 for you to see what they saw when they brought those guys into the portal. And so that's probably the biggest adjustment they have to make defensively here in the early part of the year, is that they cannot win up front on a consistent basis with their base defense, which means that Stephen Belichick is going to have to scheme up pressure. And as we learned the hard way with Jay Bateman, Gene Chizik, and other defensive coordinators in the last couple of years, when you get to that reality, if those blitzes don't get home, then this defense will be open for exposure for big plays week in, week out.
Yeah, and look, they have brought some guys. They have sent Andrew Simpson at certain times off the edge. 3 total pressures in this game. Kamori House, 3 total pressures in this game. The problem is that the guys that need to be winning up front, that need to be winning their one-on-one matchups, are not. And look, the defensive tackle spot is kind of what it is. There are going to be, some guys there that can really do a good job of rushing the passer. You're hoping that each year you can find one of those guys each year that sort of fits in there along with your run stoppers. I don't know that Carolina has one of those guys this year because you look at this game, DeAndre Robinson was the only interior defensive lineman that had a quarterback pressure in this game. Nobody else from the interior was able to get pressure on the quarterback. So, I mean, that's certainly an area that you would like to see more pressure. But the guys that are really there to get pressure are guys like Smith Vilbert. Smith Vilbert didn't have a single pressure in this game. You go back to the first game of the year, he had 3 pressures, but again, it wasn't consistent from him. Milcart Abujade in this game, 3 total pressures. He had 2 in the first game of the season as well. He's got to be able to finish those with sacks, and it needs to be more consistent. You don't have that guy that you've had the last couple of years in Kaimon Rucker. And the thing about Kaimon Rucker is that Kaimon Rucker is going to be remembered as a really solid pass rusher, but not one of the all-time greats because he didn't end all of those, a decent amount of those pressures in sacks. This is an area that you were hoping that Carolina would be a little bit better. I mean, just to have somebody that would be able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback, even if they're not able to get home, that would be huge. I don't think this group has that. And that's what's concerning. In terms of run defense, I thought they were solid in this game. Not great. Even though they only let up 21 yards, I think part of that was that Charlotte really just chose not to run the football. At a certain point in this game, they just turned this into an air raid style offense, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me from their perspective. I did think that, there were some times early in the game where they were able to rip off some runs, but I think the interior of the defensive line for Carolina did a better job with that than they did in the first game of the season. But yeah, it still, to me, is on these edge rushers. They've got to be better. And that's an area that I think you're right. They have to improve this upcoming offseason. During this season, until you can get Price Yates back, I just don't really know how good you're going to be on the defensive line. I think there are going to be a lot of games that you're going to get pushed around. There could even be moments in this game on Saturday against Richmond where Carolina gets pushed around. And that was something that we were hoping was going to change. Really, you go back to the last couple of years, it makes you wish that we did have some of those guys that were there the last couple of years, even though they weren't necessarily the most productive. They were guys that really would help Carolina now along that defensive line where it just doesn't feel like they have that much talent. The offensive line, we brought it up. I think one of the biggest things there is you're dealing with two key injuries. You need to get Christo Kelly back. You need to get Austin Blasky back. And I mean, the thing with Christo Kelly is he wasn't exactly great in the opener either. Now, part of that was, of course, due to the fact that he wasn't 100%, but you're hoping that he has more crisp snaps than what we've seen from Chad Lindbergh. And you're hoping that Austin Blasky at right guard really changes things there, especially run blocking wise. That was the thing for me was, with them, it's hard to really judge because of the slow snaps. But I thought run blocking wise, Carolina still wasn't necessarily great in this game. You had a couple of runs from Damon June where, he was able to get downhill and find a lane and run for a decent amount of yards. But part of that was he was fighting through some tackles in order to be able to do that. I still think that's the area for the offensive line that you want to see them get better. I don't think they've really been that bad in pass pro here in the first two games of the season. I think, to be honest with you, they've actually been pretty solid, especially in this game. But I do think that this is certainly one area. The run blocking is certainly an area that you want to see them get better as the season goes along.
I also think we need to come to the realization this is going to be I guess the best way to describe it is an intermediate run game. I don't know if this is going to be a run game that's going to break off 25, 30, 35, 40-yard runs. Not unless they get Davian Goss more involved in it. This is a run game that is going to be very, the offense you reference the most is Michigan. And what Michigan does is they just grind out yardage. I also think, and I kind of brought this up this morning when talking about the game on WFNZ, the offensive line won't look better in their run block until the rotation at the running back really settles down, because you block for which the rhythm of which you've got the runner running behind you. Like, with the guy like Damon June, he's going to get the ball and he's just going to go. He's going to put his foot in the ground, find someone somewhere to run. But maybe you've got a more patient runner, like maybe say Caleb Hood, for instance, who's going to take a second. Well, when you have that type of rotation coming in, the offensive line never gets in a rhythm because they're having to change the way they got to set up the block for their specific running back. And so that's a real niche thing, but it's a real important thing. And it's something that I don't think it's talked about enough when you hear people break down offensive line play, where as much as a quarterback is in rhythm, an offensive line gets within a rhythm as well, because they know what to expect with the quarterback. They know what to expect with the running back behind them. Well, when you're changing out 2 or 3 offensive linemen, it feels like every other play, and every other play there's a different running back. There's not a rhythm being set. There's not a continuity that's being developed along them up front. The injuries are, yes, still the biggest thing, because I think it would look a lot cleaner with Christo Kelly at center. You put Blasky back in there. I think you feel really good about what side of the line could be your strongest. I think Travion Green needs to be this team's starting left tackle every Saturday moving forward. Like, I think those are some adjustments this week that hopefully this staff has seen, and okay, the evaluation period at that is over. Let's start to build that continuity up front. But when you you look at it from top to bottom, though, they ran it 33 times for $148. That rounds out to a 4.5 yard per average. So if you're averaging 4.5 yards a carry, that's, a first down every 3 run plays. So I thought the best thing they did, and I think it's why they managed the game the way that they did, they knew in the second half they were bigger, faster, and stronger. They just leaned into, we could kind of run the ball, play field position, and get out of here. That's a kind of an NFL thing that you see a lot of teams do when they've got the lead that Carolina had going into the halftime with some bad weather coming into the stadium as well. So it's still a work in progress, but I think it's important to remember this whole team, this whole program is still a work in progress. It's game 2 of Bill Belichick, not year 4 of Bill Belichick. And there's, as we came to the conclusion after the TCU performance, there are going to be some growing pains along the way, but those growing pains hurt a lot less when you're doing so when you're winning as opposed to losing.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. For me, I think with the run game, and let's focus on that here for a minute. I think you have to, first of all, give your flowers to Damon June. I thought he was really, really good in this game. I think he was probably the best player on the field the whole night, maybe outside of a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball for Carolina. 9 carries, 52 yards in this one. Really just, ran with the
purpose,
physicality, the purpose that you really need to see from your running backs. A guy that just took the ball, got downhill, and made plays for Carolina. That's what you want to see. And I think that really is going to land with Bill Belichick. He's a guy that likes those types of physical runners. You go back, one of the guys that always sticks out to me when you think physical runner under Bill Belichick was BenJarvus Green-Ellis. I think this could be sort of the type of player that you see Damon June become in this offense. And I think that's one of the good things that you can pull away from this game is that they tried so many guys at the running back position, and it feels like they stumbled into something. I don't know if Damon June was a guy that they were planning on running much this season. After that performance, you have no choice. He should be, if he's not your lead back, he should be the second running back taking snaps for Carolina this season. Now, the thing is, if I am picking who's the first running back that's taking snaps, I'm picking Davian Goss. I don't know what Davian Goss did. I don't know whose breakfast he spit in. I don't know what he's doing in practice. I have no idea. But clearly he is not doing what he's supposed to, because they put Charleston French in the game before they put him in the other night. And when he enters, no offense to Charleston French, but Charleston French comes in, carries the ball once, nothing really overly effective, 3 yards. He has 1 reception for 1 yard. That was it. They throw Davian Goss into the game. He carries the ball 5 times for 30 yards and finds the end zone. This dude should be playing a lot more for Carolina. And I get it, man. If he is not practicing hard, then it's hard to put him out there on the field. But if he is, and you're just looking at this running back room and you're wondering what the pecking order is, I think Davian Goss is probably the guy that should be getting, the first team carries. Damon June should be right behind him. And then maybe Caleb Hood works his way in after that. Caleb Hood's been all right, but outside of that first drive against TCU, he hasn't really been able to run with the purpose that he needs to. And unfortunately, it's led to a lack of success. But maybe part of that is just because the run blocking hasn't been all that great for him. I'd have to go back and really reevaluate it and compare it to some of what you see from the other guys. But I think those are the three guys that you should be looking to use in this room. I speak for myself, and maybe there's other people that feel different. I've seen enough of Benjamin Hall. I'm good. I think he looks the exact same like he looked at Michigan last year. He might be 235 pounds, but he doesn't run the way that a guy like Damon June runs. And so, to me, I think you found some guys in the backfield that can really do something for you. Now it's about actually using those guys here in the weeks moving forward.
Yeah, I think, Davian Goss should be running back one. I mean, at this rate, did he slide into Jordan Hudson's DMs? Did he hit him up with a "Hey, you up, girl" at like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night while her and Belichick were watching God knows what? I don't know, because it's really mind-blowing. I mean, for as much as we talked and hyped him up in June, July, and August, to see him run the ball as limited as he has the first two games, I mean, it makes us just look stupid, which is I hope is not the case, and I don't think it's the case. He'd be my first option. I think you like Caleb Hood as your third down back, just because there's, the ability to pick up pass protection. There's a physicality that he plays with. He's just a limited running back, man. Like it is. Yep. There's not a burst of speed there. He's just, he can get you 3 to 4 yards. And in the process, he might go run someone over, which I think we as fans would really love. I think you look at Damon June, and that guy just runs pissed off. He runs with the purpose that it's honestly, it's just hard to tackle. Don't matter who he's running against. If he runs that way against Clemson will have a hard time tackling him. It's not just Charlotte that had an issue. And so, those would be my three. Maybe you give Benjamin Hall a chance every now and again. I do think that maybe this is just a guy that was misevaluated coming out of high school, that landed at Michigan, didn't fit there, is now at Carolina. I don't think he's going to be anything of significance here either. But those three backs, I think, can be your three backs that you can count on a game in, game out basis. But I still think Davian Goss has the highest ceiling of everybody in that running back room. And I'd like to see what the production would look like with 15, 20 carries in a game. Hopefully we get somewhere closer to that this upcoming weekend, because I think if Carolina can establish a consistent runner to pair with Gio Lopez in the backfield, I think it'll do wonders for this offense.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. I think as long as, or at least just get a rotation back there, because as you mentioned, it's going to allow the offensive line to be more comfortable too, because they know who is running behind them, what they have to do in order to open up running lanes for that type of player. That's the thing that I think is important for Carolina. And yeah, that just comes with, the continuity, as we talked about. You got to figure it out at running back, and you've got to figure it out on the offensive line. And hopefully Carolina is able to do that here throughout this week. You go to the defensive side of the ball, and look, Carolina, they did a really good job defensively in this game. Holds Charlotte to the fewest points that they've held an opponent to since 2001 in a game against Clemson, where they allowed 3 points. But look, this was still a group that, even though they ran for 21 yards, I didn't think anybody in the front seven was really overly fantastic. You brought up DeAndre Robinson as a guy that had a pretty decent game. He had 6 total tackles in this game. The problem is that only one of those was a tackle for loss. So that's certainly something that you would like to see. If he's going to be that active, you would like to see a few more of those go for a TFL. But I really thought that there were some other guys that really stepped up, primarily in the secondary. I thought your 3 leaders in the secondary, in terms of the class that they're in, outside of Will Hardy. We've talked about him being the vocal leader. I think guys that led by example, though, the other night. Thaddeus Dixon continues to be great. Just 2 targets in this game, only allows 1 reception, and that went for -1 yards, picks up a tackle for loss there. Gavin Gibson was everywhere, 6 total tackles in this game. 1 tackle for loss. He was targeted 5 times in this game, allowed just 2 receptions for 18 yards. And then this was a guy that really needed a bounce-back performance. We thought this was a guy that could potentially start the game on the bench, or at least would have to split time at his spot. Carolina decided to stick by him, and they seemed justified in doing that. Marcus Allen targeted 6 times in this game, allows just 2 receptions for 19 yards. I thought all 3 of those guys had really strong performances, and I think what you're seeing already is that Dixon and Gibson, both 2 guys that Carolina picked up in the portal, that are off to really good starts to this season.
Yeah, Thad Dixon is one of one. You want to call? Yeah, I think he's earned the Rude Boy title. He's the best defensive back. He's the best. Argue the best defensive player on Carolina's roster. He's lived up to everything he was supposed to be and more. Upon coming over to Carolina from Washington last year in the portal. I thought Gavin Gibson there, as you mentioned, was everywhere. I think there was a physicality that you like having on the back end of the defense. There was some attitude that you like seeing as well. And so I think you've got an answer with him and what he can be to shore up the secondary. And then I think for Marcus Allen, I think he looked that way because of the level of competition. I don't think Marcus Allen is a power 4 conference corner. And that opinion will not change until, he holds his own against a power 4 conference opponent. And we'll see that in 2 weeks against Central Florida. When Carolina hits the road in their next meaningful contest. And even then, just where that program is at and where they are with Scott Frost, kind of like where Carolina is under Belichick, where it's a complete reset after their head coach left his position to go be the offensive coordinator in Tallahassee. It might be that Clemson game before we get a much more firm evaluation, but hopefully he's got some confidence back in himself, because I think that's been the biggest thing that's held him back is when he struggles, man, he has not been mentally tough to put that play behind him and go up and line up and make the next play. But it was encouraging to see him respond, because moving forward, every team is going to game plan to target him. And he knows that. So how does he handle that? How does Carolina handle that? Do they roll a safety over there to give him a little bit more help so he isn't playing as much one-on-one as he was in the game against TCU where he got exposed? And so it was a step in the right direction. I think you've got to be pleased, I think, with what you saw from Carolina after how disastrous it was on Monday night. You allowed just 271 yards of total offense and 21 yards, in the running game. I thought the effort was better. I thought the energy was better. I thought they rallied to the football better. They played more complete. They played more whole. Yeah. And that's how this defense is going to have to win. They ain't got dudes like Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, where they've got, dudes that can, at all 3 levels, one-on-one can dominate games. We ain't there. We're going to get there. Belichick's going to we're going to get it there. We're not there yet. It's got to be a team defense. And I thought they took a step playing like a team on Saturday, and we'll see what they can do this upcoming week, because if they're going to win and compete the way that we want them to, obviously what they did against TCU can't happen as often as it's used to happening around here.
Yeah, and if they start winning up front, that's the way that you can get to be a really successful defense, a really complete defense. Hopefully that's something that Carolina is able to do. All right, let's answer a question here real quick from Greg Ward, and then we will talk about the expectations for the remainder of the season before we get out of here. Greg Ward says, do you all think that it's that on offense, it's more of Freddie's play calling, Gio's limitations, or a combination of both? I think it's probably a combination of both. And that's why I said earlier, I do believe that Freddie Kitchens' play calling is incredibly bland. I think that's something that we saw from him at the NFL level. I don't think that's something that's going to change here. But the one thing that I will say is that you've got to remember that in his system, he was able to get a guy like Baker Mayfield to thrive. That was Baker's best year before he got to Tampa Bay. So it is possible for a quarterback to thrive. I think, and I said this last week, and I still stick by it, I think that this marriage between these two sides was a very weird one. I don't think Gio Lopez even remotely fit what Carolina was looking for. Carolina wanted a guy that was going to be more of a pro-style quarterback. And it does not make sense to me why they went out and got Gio Lopez, because I just don't think that marriage made a lot of sense. But this is what you did. I think you panicked. You went out and got the most talented quarterback, and you felt like you were going to be able to get him to understand the system and it was going to work. I don't know if that's necessarily what's happening here as we sit here early in the season. And it could take more time, but it's like I said, if he wasn't ready to run this offense, then he shouldn't have been the guy running this offense. You knew that Max Johnson was 100% healthy at the start of camp. You could have started Max Johnson and seen where it went from there. You also agreed to a 2-year deal with Gio Lopez, so this means that he would be back next season. It's just, it's a weird situation for me, because I feel like when I watch this offense, I think that Gio is definitely limited, and I think that his play caller is really concerned about some of his limitations. But at the same time, I do think that there are strengths of Gio's that Freddie Kitchens could do a much better job of bringing out of him. And he's not doing that so far because he is so stuck on running this system that he's bringing here. So I think there's a little bit of stubbornness on both sides, and I think that's kind of led to where Carolina's offense is right now.
Yeah, great question, Greg. Always appreciate your input whenever we're doing these live shows. I think it's more Freddie Kitchens than it is Gio Lopez, just because he hasn't called an offense that gets the most out of his quarterback. If we were seeing RPOs, if we were seeing the offense that he, engineered at South Alabama, if we were seeing him in the no huddle, if we were seeing him play with the way that we thought he was going to play upon transferring up, and this was the level of play we'd get, I'd tell you Gio Lopez is the problem. That ain't what we're getting. And it does make me wonder, how much is Freddie Kitchens being able to run the offense the way he wants to run it? And how much is this Bill Belichick telling him, this is the way I want to play, so this is the way I want you to call the offense? Because you took a long time for Nick Saban to adapt to the modern style, the way that college football got played on the offensive side of the ball, and rightfully so, because he won championships running a pro-style system. But even he got to the point where he realized, man, you can't play. It's a different game. And so I think Freddie Kitchens, Bill Belichick need to realize, we got a guy that is not going to be at his best playing within the confines of a structured pocket. He's going to play better when plays break down, when he's moving, when he's running, when we're snapping the ball with 27 seconds on the clock, all those types of things. And so there's definitely concerns for Gio. The anticipation is something that guys anticipate throws when they're playing with confidence. He ain't confident right now. When they're comfortable within the offense, you anticipate those throws better. Because we saw this with Bryce Young. That's something we talked about a lot with his struggles. Well, you saw it in last year when he got confident. All of a sudden, he was anticipating those throws that you got to make at the NFL level. And the college games become the same way, where you've got to make throws now. You got to throw guys open because of how complex these schemes have gotten. So I think today I lean more Freddie Kitchens' play calling as opposed to the play of Gio Lopez. But I do think this will be the thing that we probably evaluate and monitor on a week-to-week basis, because what happens with that marriage ultimately will determine what we're talking about next, which is just how high this team can fly in year one under the hoodie.
So, yeah, let's talk about that, because judging off of this game and judging off of social media, I think a lot of people are feeling like this is a game that has the expectations really being dialed back for this season. If they weren't already dialed back after that game against TCU, I think most people are saying now, hey, we got to dial it back even more. We've got to have this as, a season where it's a building process. And maybe Carolina does go 4-8. Maybe they do end up barely missing a bowl game at 5-7, or God forbid, at the height, they end up scraping their way to a bowl game. I think that's kind of where I'm at. I think this could be like Butch Davis's first year in Chapel Hill, where Carolina ends up going 4-8. And, part of it is it's not on Bill Belichick and this staff, because they got in here late. They weren't able to go through the winter portal the way that they needed to. But I do think it's okay to be a little disheartened as a Carolina fan when you're sitting here and realizing that, yeah, there's a good chance that this team really isn't going to be that great this season. That, all the money that was sunk into Bill Belichick, sunk into the program, really isn't going to show up until year 2. But I think that's kind of where you got to get to. If Carolina was going to be a serious contender especially in the ACC. But if they were going to be a team that was going to be competing to win like 8 games or something like that, they would have won this game by more. To me, this Charlotte team is as bad as it gets in the FBS, and Carolina should have really dominated this game. They didn't. I think that shows you that the talent gap is not where it needs to be from Carolina to a team like Charlotte, and it's not going to be nearly all in the range that it needs to be able to consistently compete week in and week out in the ACC. There'll be some teams that they'll be able to beat. Don't get it wrong. I think Stanford is definitely a team that Carolina should be able to beat. They'll probably, be able to scrape a couple of wins elsewhere, on the schedule as well. A team like UCF, who should be towards the bottom of the Big 12. I believe they were predicted to finish last in the Big 12 this offseason. I mean, it makes sense that could be a game that Carolina wins, and maybe they find a way to win a game against Virginia or somebody like that and scrape their way into a bowl game. But I left the other night looking at this team and saying they got a long way to go, long way to go to be a team that's going to easily make it into bowl season and be staring down the chance to win 8 games. That's just how I feel based on this game.
Yeah, I still think this team is going to go bowling. I do think the top end is probably 8-4 with an upset win that they probably should not get, like a Duke, or maybe they sweep Duke and NC State. You're going to get to 2-1 this weekend. I think Central Florida is a toss-up game. Central Florida is not good. So it could be a battle of 2 not-so-good football teams. I think you maybe expect Bill Belichick to outcoach Scott Frost. So if you get that one, you get to 3. I think, they're going to beat they should beat Stanford. They should beat Wake Forest. That right there gets you to 5. You just got to find one win along the way to secure yourself going to a bowl game, and then you can go from there. So definitely not where I was when we went through the schedule the week before the opener, where they were at 10-2. But I think there's one thing you got to give credit for is like Michael Lombardi, when he started doing his summer talking stuff, when he reemerged from the darkness and was back on McAfee and all these different platforms. He said we're not going to be as good in September as we're going to be in October, and we're not going to be as good in October as we are in November. This is a foundational year for the program, as much as it is on the field, as much as it is off the field. And so I still think they're going to go bowling. It may not look the way that we thought it was going to look. It may not be as impressive as we want it to be, as we thought it was going to be, when you hire an 8-time Super Bowl winning head coach to come run your college football program. But I do think this team will continue to get better. They'll continue to improve. Once they get a firm evaluation of who they are on both sides of the football, they'll be able to coach those guys up in ways that Mack Brown, Larry Fedora, Butch Davis never could when they were on the sidelines here. And so I'm not going to panic just yet. I still think this will be a season that will be memorable enough that when we look back at the Bill Belichick experience in totality, we can look at what they did this year and say they laid the groundwork for the future, which I do think this program is still poised to really take that next step, as they've made football a priority for the first time in ways that they haven't done so since the 1940s.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. I definitely do. But
I will be.
4-8, I think definitely entered the mind the other night sitting there watching this team, and it really didn't seem like the craziest thing because I mean, Charlotte. You look at Richmond. I mean, I don't think Charlotte's that far off from Richmond. I think this is a game where you're hoping that Carolina really gets much better on the offensive side of the ball. And again, maybe taking those strides is just asking too much right now. But I'm hoping that as the season goes along, Carolina is going to get better. The thing is that their schedule is definitely, probably a little bit tougher than maybe some people thought. That game at Cal, not going to be easy. That's a game that, going into the year, I personally thought Carolina was going to win and win going away because I thought with the running back issues that Cal had, this would be a team that really wouldn't be all that good. Well, they've got a quarterback that's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country so far this season through 2 games. Now that's, how much is that really saying? We'll have to see. But I do think that they are certainly a much tougher team than we thought. And Virginia is probably a team that's going to be a little bit tougher than we thought. The way that they played the other day against NC State. Now you could say maybe they allow a similar offensive output from Carolina. But I mean, that's the thing is when you don't have confidence in your offense, it's hard to really be that confident in your team. So this is on Freddie Kitchens. This is on Gio Lopez to step up as the year goes along and give me a little bit more confidence in this team. Because, I mean, if they make it to a bowl game, I feel like this season's a success. I think that's a step in the right direction for Carolina, especially if they can find a way to win that bowl game and you've set the foundation for this season. If they miss out on a bowl game, then you're getting into that conversation about this year being a failure, depending on how it looks towards the end of the season. So we'll have to see how it works out for Carolina. But, certainly this was a game against Charlotte that I really thought Carolina was going to put together a much better performance, much more efficient performance on the offensive side of the ball. And that's not necessarily what we got. And I think it makes sense if you're one of those fans that's dialing back your expectations a little for this season. Want you guys to let us know in the comments on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. What are you doing with your expectations for this season? Are you dialing them back based off of what we've seen these first 2 games of the season? Or are you staying true to your preseason prediction? What are you doing with that? Also, would love your answers on the question that we were talking about earlier about this offense and whether it's more on Freddie Kitchens' play calling or Gio Lopez's limitations. So make sure you guys leave that in the comments for us. We will respond to those with you guys as well. But tonight, that's going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. So make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughVlog.com. Read the recap article that's up there, my takeaways from the game, where I go a little more in depth on what exactly I saw in this game against Charlotte. So make sure you go back and read that. Again, we are having trouble sharing that into some of the Facebook groups. So if you're someone that's used to seeing those in those Facebook groups and you're not seeing them now, that's probably the reason why. Make sure you go over, like, and subscribe to our page over there on Facebook, and that'll make sure that all of those articles are on your timeline. The better way to do it is just go over to the Twitter page and give us a follow over there. When you do, hit that notification bell that's right next to it right there. Turn on all notifications, because for us, the only things that we put on that page are, the articles, the podcasts when they go live, and then maybe throw up some podcast editions afterwards. That's the only stuff that's on that feed. So you will not, be spammed with anything else. There won't be other random retweets and stuff like that, like there are with some of our personal accounts where, we're following the Panthers, we're following the Mets, we're following all these other teams. That's the streamline directly to our product, our services. So make sure that you guys go on there, give that a follow, and turn on those post notifications. That's the best way to do it. Also, we, of course, continue to push that you guys go to our YouTube page and subscribe to our YouTube page for us. That would really help us. Even if you're not someone that's over there watching during this edition of the show, make sure you go over there and help us out. We would greatly appreciate that. We're trying to expand that YouTube page here a little bit, get more people to watch on that YouTube page. So that's certainly something that we encourage you guys to do. That's also a great way to be able to interact with us, is to go there. You can type in your comments on YouTube. We had a couple comments that came in earlier tonight that we threw up there that you guys can see. So, hopefully that's a way that you guys are watching, and hopefully you are subscribed to that page, because we greatly appreciate it. If you're a listener to the podcast, we really do appreciate you guys as well. Make sure you go over anywhere that you get your podcast and subscribe to the podcast so that you can listen to the audio editions. Those will, populate in there anytime that we put up a new episode. So make sure that you guys are doing that. But for now, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Want to thank all of you guys for watching and listening to this edition. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. And as always, go Tar Heels.